We're live. Welcome to an episode of Austro-Thomism Round. I'm with Spellcarver and Eincast. How you guys doing?
I'm doing fine.
Cannot complain. How are you, Caleb?
I'm doing great. Just got another podcast. Got some wine and energy drink and a Mountain Dew because I don't drink water.
Wait, did you say wine and an energy drink?
Yes.
That is not a recommended combination.
No,
this
it's not.
This is actually worse than the Jim Beam Peach and Coke that you were doing last time I was on a thing with you.
Yes,
And, we need to mature your beverages of choice a little bit. This is getting a little embarrassing.
This is bear fruit mango flavored wine.
What?
Wait,
Yeah, I know. It's,
mango, huh?
yeah, it's not
That
bad.
is
It's like $6, so it's not bad. But
$6. Okay, yeah, fair enough.
well, we do a roundtable on abortion, give the news about Roe v. Wade. I figured we'd open up, kind of talk about the news, current events, that kind of thing. What's the Roe v. Wade stuff, and then we kind of get more into the philosophy side of why we're pro-life, and then do some critiquing of some pro-choice arguments that aren't the typical pro-choice arguments, Evictionism and Ayn Rand's argument, because they're much more philosophically inclined, and I think much better than the regular pro-choice arguments that are offered.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Yeah. So, and they want to open on guess. You know current events around the news? You want to cover it? Or you want me to cover it?
How about you go for it? We can sort of chip in as required.
Sounds good. Well, Roe v. Wade is coming up for a vote in the Supreme Court, and there was for the first time I think ever. I read somewhere it's actually the second leak the Supreme Court's ever had. The first link was around the original Roe v. Wade, which is interesting. But the leak apparently it might be struck down in June. I think it was 5-4. It was leaked, and now everyone is freaking out about the left losing the sacrament of abortion. And it's getting pretty hectic out there. A left-wing activist group tweeted out the addresses of all the Supreme Court justices so they could go protest in front of their own house and encourage a diversity of tactics. Wink, wink.
The diversity of tactics. Wow.
Yeah, and so the left loves their diversity.
They have to use the word diverse even when they're
That's
making
become a drinking game. You scroll through leftist Twitter and take a selfie every time they say diversity.
Oh, that is kind of darkly funny.
Yeah. And so everyone's freaking out, and there's a lot of because I think 3 members of the court are Catholic currently, and so Catholics have been blamed a lot. People are blaming Catholics for this, which has sparked a lot of Catholics coming out who are pro-choice and making arguments for pro-choice. And so figure this is a perfect time for good Catholics who are pro-life to actually understand philosophy and Catholicism to talk about it, rebut some arguments, and offer a actual view of why we should be pro-life.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I also saw a meme that not American here, the last 4 or 5, maybe more presidents were Protestant. They didn't ban abortion for 4 years of Trump, 8 years of Obama, but 2 years Biden, the Catholic president.
That's right.
Get rid of Roe v. Wade.
The Protestants couldn't do it. The Muslims couldn't do it. Only the Catholics.
Yeah, somehow through the grace of the Holy Spirit, Biden backs in ass first into an abortion ban.
It's amazing. Hopefully we're lucky.
So just a couple of random little political comments, because I found this so interesting, because I've been following a couple of different sort of legal channels that sort of pay attention to some Supreme Court stuff, and it hadn't really been talked about, but the sort of odds on money thing was whenever this decision actually comes out, and I heard this probably because the case, I think, started in 2018 or something like that, because justice is pretty slow once it moves slowly, but grinds a fine powder kind of thing. But probably earlier, probably January, February, I remember hearing some people that I have a pretty good track record on this stuff talking about it and be yeah, this is almost certainly going to be probably 5-4 to either the sort of things are up in the air where either they would sort of maintain federal control, but really make a stricter requirement, the viability requirement was going to have to change slightly, or they were going to do what it looks like they're going to do and turn it over to the state. So it's people that have been following the case weren't surprised at all about the decision. What sort of was surprising was the timing and the leak, and then it sort of came out early. So when I heard that this happened, I wasn't surprised at all about what the decision was. It was just I didn't think I was going to hear about this for another month or two.
Yeah.
No, it's anyone listening, you may not know this, but Roe v. Wade is not an abortion. If it goes down, it's not like abortion goes away. It just reverts power back to the states to make their own decisions, which, if we're lucky, this will lead to a greater separation between the states.
Yes, that is actually another good political point. It might lead to further decentralization, and I've heard it might de-incentivize certain blue staters from moving to red states, which is another good thing. I think some red states have trigger laws in case Roe v. Wade is I don't know if the word is repealed, or I don't know what the correct legal jargon is, but removed or rescinded. So I don't know which red states those are. I think, or maybe wrong. I just heard about it. I'm not as everyone knows, I'm not American, so I'm not an expert in American legal issues. Yeah. But that would also be, there is the good side of, less babies are being killed, but also the political side, which also seems to be positive. We don't seem to be making, I think, that much of a trade-off here.
Yeah. No, it's but I am being a little bit of a hypocrite tonight, I think, because I tweeted out how debating abortion is dumb and a waste of time when you can debate the right. But since I consider libertarians and objectivists right wing, and I think our critique in consortium is right wing, our critiques are not making me a hypocrite of my arguments about why debating abortion is dumb. So I think we should be in the clear for this. One thing I'll point out is Roe v. Wade was, I think, 70 years ago, and it has such the language of Roe v. Wade has been such a major impact. Like, for example, the medical term for a baby's phases and its in a woman's pregnancy is called trimesters. That term did not originate from any medical science. It originated in a court of law and was used by the Roe side of the. I think Roe was the pro-abortion side. To make on for why it's phases and why certain phases are okay because it's not really a fully formed life yet. This entire trimester thing about it, how it's argued, at least in the court case and by pro-abortion, that it's not a human to a certain trimester. Does not, kind of like a lot of people, they don't understand what a form of something is and what the potentiality of something is. And it's just, again points to the lack of proper understanding of Aristotelianism and philosophy, leading to more terrible decisions in language that is just not helpful or accurate. Guys, go ahead, give me a moment.
Yeah, I was appalled when I heard that. I wasn't that surprised at all. We do take a lot of our language for granted, and if we look at who dominated during the 20th century, at least in terms of cultural victories and political victories, then, well, we should not be surprised that our language is modeled on the language of the victors.
Yeah.
And getting off topic a little bit, but a deeper point than that is, as so much of the strategy of the left for the last 100 years or so has been things like these linguistic tricks, is these Mott and Bailey strategies. It's these sort of Orwellian tactics of, okay, well, if we can get you speaking our language, we've won half the battle already.
Yes.
And it's something it's not just that they won, they get to determine the language. Is the language has been a weapon of the culture war for for the last 100 years.
Yeah, I've been listening to Michael Nose's book Speechless: Controlling Thoughts, Controlling Minds. Words, Controlling Minds. And much as I disagree with some of it, because his book's all against. Well, I don't think he's wrong to go after free speech, but his arguments are just, well, in the past, here's the past, the history there. It's like, okay, this is a historical example. It's not an argument. But his examples of the left controlling language to make political change is really interesting. I wish I could remember any of the examples he gave. Maybe that's a book we should cover one day, because the examples that are given. Real quick, God of Lord. This is a joke. He did not actually convert, because he following it a little. No, he did not convert. God of Lord. This is a joke. But no, the left controlling language has been like one of the most successful strategies, and this is something we should probably do a whole roundtable on. Just examples of left. I try my best to avoid using leftist words except for LGBTQIA+, because every time that gets longer, it looks more absurd. And so the more absurd they look, the better for me.
Yes. Two things on that. First, Voltaire's prayer of "Lord, make my enemies ridiculous." That is certainly something that, that prayer is one which has been answered resoundingly throughout the centuries. But also, ironically, but very appropriately at the same time, of someone who was actually very good at spotting this metaphysical smuggling was Ayn Rand. I think she actually used the word "the smuggle metaphysics" or metaphysical suppositions into language. I believe in The Virtue of Selfishness, which we recently had a roundtable on. she discusses, it might be in the argument of intimidation or the cult of moral grayness, the essay, one of those, possibly both essays, where people will sort of, if you bow down to their language, you're sort of accepting their metaphysical suppositions of what good and evil are. Like saying, well, no one's entirely black or white. It's like, okay, sure, a man has made black decisions and a man has made white decisions, or a man has made decisions which contain components of black and white, but black and white exist. You don't need to accept their metaphysical suppositions. You don't need to bow down to their language. She was actually very, very good at spotting this.
I'm taking a note on this. This has got to be a whole roundtable we do sooner or later, because this is a very interesting topic that we could go all night on, I think.
Yeah, we could
so
go throughout the entirety of the 20th century and just evaluate the English language. I could probably, if I really, wanted to make the extra effort, go through the Portuguese language as well, which would be very, very interesting. But I probably, I need to do some very heavy historical revisionism of Brazil ever since the military coup, basically.
This is something Jeff Dice has hopped on a lot on his Twitter and on his lectures, is that language is under attack. We have to not use their words. And that's I think it's long stuff. I might reach out to him. This might be a long stuff. I'm gonna try reaching out to him for a roundtable. So he'd be great for that. But let's get to the topic of abortion. Well, so before we go into offering critiques, I think it'd be better if we kind of laid out a Catholic pro-life stance. And so Catholic pro-life stance is life begins at conception, when the fetus is first conceived. So when the sperm meets the egg, it forms a zygote, and the zygote is the early stages of human life. It may not look like human in any way, shape, or form. It will evolve and turn into more of what we understand as typical human being to look like. But in its form and its essence, it is still a early stage of human development, and it only has potentiality to achieve its regular how we view human beings. But in form, it's still human and acts as that potential true process of its birth. So, anyone have any way they want to phrase that differently, or is that a
well? So the one thing I want to get into a little bit, because I think it's very interesting, and we can go as long as this as you guys want to. But the sort of history of Catholic thought on this, going back to I was seeing today, I think there's a record from a letter of Barnabas or something like that, where in the first century, where the Catholic Church and since then has been explicitly like at any point during pregnancy, abortion is wrong and is a grave sin. It's also interesting to note that sort of their thinking, or the church's thinking on the science has sort of evolved a little bit. That they didn't really make a lot of distinctions in the very early church, and then when Aquinas sort of got big, as it were, in I guess the 12th and 13th centuries, they adopted a lot of his understanding of the development of the fetus, which I think he actually got. I was trying to find a source for this today because I'd read it previously, but I couldn't dig up another source for it. But apparently, when Alexander the Great was off conquering somewhere, there was some culture that they took over, and they had had some preserved fetuses at various stages of development that were like kept in jars basically, and he sent them back to Aristotle to be like, hey, what do you think of these?
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Right. But it was based on examining those that Aristotle sort of developed to the day of, and I think it was when they could first identify primary sex characteristics, is when they could say, okay, at this point it's clearly male or female, and that was Aristotle's point of making the distinction. Okay, yeah, like if it wasn't a male or female, we don't know what it was. Once it's male or female, we can sit there and say that it's a person. And the church was sort of on board with this when they picked up Aristotle again, like I said, in the scholastic era. Didn't change their view that if that hadn't happened yet, that it was still a grave sin. It just wasn't homicide. Like when Pope started giving. Go ahead.
It's a grave moral disorder, but it's not homicide. Yeah, it's on that level.
Right. And then it's been and they sort of had the idea of the quickening, which you don't really hear about anymore, but this is the first time that the mother can notice the motion of her child in the womb. Usually happens around when Aristotle had said, okay, this is when we think this is happening. So that was sort of a significant point. Like, okay, at that point, yeah, the soul has entered that body, and it's a person now. And people tend to like give criticism of the Catholic Church's stance on abortion, be like, oh, this is this 2,000-year-old thing. It was with the advent of modern biology and sort of understanding, okay, yeah, like Aristotle was kind of wrong about these things. Just because we couldn't see a penis or whatever didn't mean it wasn't already a boy or a girl. And it's okay. We know what an egg is. We know what sperm are. We know once the church said, okay, we sort of get the biology now. that they were able to say, "Yep, life begins at conception," and this is not something we invented 1,000 years ago. This is something we figured out with the advent of microscopes and modern biology.
Yeah, I love how people claim it's like how to put this. Bill Nye, the science guy. Well, I don't really call him science because he's not really a scientist. Trent Horn did a butter to his video on abortion, and it was the kind of claim anyone who's like pro-life doesn't understand science. And it was just like, it was so hard watching it because I'm like, I'm not a scientist anyway. I like read 2 science books my entire life, but even just like understand the basics of it, I know more about the process of a fetus, the life cycle of a fetus, I guess, than he did. And it was like, no, we the pro life side is the pro science side. We get the science of it.
I remember seeing. Go ahead.
No, it's just that let's say that actually God handed us down that somehow the soul only enters when it, has sexual characteristics, the fetus. You're still going against the teleology of the thing. So it's still a grave moral disorder. Even if it would not be on the level of homicide, you are purposefully denying a soul's entry into the world.
Yes.
After the teleology of it being there is established. So even then, I think we could still make the argument. Thankfully, we don't need to, but even then, our position isn't really that diminished, I think.
Okay, do you want guess what? Anything else on all points?
Sorry.
It's perfectly fine. 2 different points off of that. One, I remember seeing that Bill Nye clip from back whenever it was, and it's Caleb. You mentioned when we were starting, or at the very beginning, like there's a couple of we want to try and address the sort of sane the more coherent arguments. Bill Nye's was not one of those. Like, it's just so I can't. Like, it was some kind of thing that like, and this is I don't want to get into this because it's just such a disingenuous argument. But people got miscarriage, and it's like, well, miscarriages happen in this, and like he was trying to say like every miscarriage needed to be classified a homicide. It was just something on that level of insanity of like this has nothing to do with the debate at hand.
There was a guy.
Go
ahead. No, go ahead. I'll wait.
I have nothing to do but groan about just the disingenuous of those arguments.
Yeah, there was a guy on Twitter who said, you don't see the pro-life crowd who chants abortion is murder, carrying signs that say a miscarriage or suicide. And it's like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Oh yeah, I saw that. That was insane.
I didn't tweet it because I knew I got my account taken down, but I quote tweeted and I said, I wish you would miscarriage yourself.
Yeah, I think you shared that on Catholic GC.
I can't tweet that because I don't want to get my account taken down, but like that is just so fucking dumb.
Yeah,
like,
that was
just so stupid.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to bring up, and this is more to Bulgakov's point, that this idea of you've denied a soul a chance to enter the world, that it doesn't ultimately the church doesn't care too much whether or not the thing that you're killing was ensouled or not. I always love going back to Humanae Vitae because I think it's just one of the best.
I need to finish that.
It's amazing. So, and everyone sort of knows it as the anti-contraception thing, but like just the logic there applies here just as well. Like there is something sacred about life. There's something really important about creating life. And if you're Catholic and you sit there and say, okay, this is it's the procreation is important enough that contraception is a grave disorder, then clearly abortion must be at any point.
Yeah, they forget we actually condemn contraception. So at this point, like you don't really think that the ensoulment obviously makes a huge difference on the moral disorder that you're committing, but it doesn't make a difference to the fact that we are condemning it either way.
Yeah. No, the excuse me. The lack of teleology in most people's in modern philosophy, and specifically in the issue of abortion, like especially when it comes to abortion and contraception, is like no one has a teleology of what sex is for, and it's just you read any modern like philosophy or politics on sex, abortion, or anything, the lack of that is obvious, and it's really I make an argument that the lack of teleology is what led to a lot of these major philosophical problems today. Like theology is so important, and it's just completely ignored by modern. Like Ayn Rand ignores it, and she's like one of the better philosophers of the 20th century.
She's so much better with ideas like essence and understanding the nature of things. But like you said, like no one has or appreciates any idea of teleology for So you end up sort of having these things like, well, this is sort of what I feel like I want to have happen, and then you get these really stupid arguments because no one knows what anything is or what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, and I would also say that the secular version of teleology is usually functionalism, which is basically trying to establish things from Darwinian characteristics. And I sort of understand the urge here. You're trying to recuperate a good thing, namely teleology. But a lot of the time, that kind of fails if you don't have a metaphysical idea of what the essence of a thing is and what it's supposed to be. So everything has functions in a specific scenario, but man doesn't really have an end goal. Like, he has functions as a social animal, he has functions, and there's different functions there as a member of a society, as a member of a family, and then is he a son, is he a father, is he a mother, is he a daughter, is he an uncle, is he a whatever? And there's like social functions that we can debate on that. But if you don't have a metaphysical idea of what man is, you're going to end in this very weird, it's formalism without content almost, which is very, very sterile, I think. And it's really counterproductive a lot of the time. But I would say even then we could sort of make the argument for it, because I remember that E.O. Wilson, the evolutionary biologist, very, very smart guy, but he made the argument that, sex isn't for procreation, it's for pair bonding. Therefore, promiscuity should be allowed in communities. And Roger Scruton just responded with, well, if sex is for pair bonding, then surely you should bond in pairs and stay bonded. Therefore, ergo, your very argument leads to monogamy, marriage, and procreation, which is what you're trying to disprove, which I thought was quite funny.
Screwing's just amazing. Okay, anybody have anything else they want to add on the point of teleology or on the Catholic pro-life arguments and position before we move on to some rebuttals?
I suspect we'll get in more into the meat of the particulars when we're addressing those arguments.
Okay. Which one do you want to do first? Ayn Rand, James Martin, or Catholics for Choice, or Evictionism?
We can keep James Martin in the middle if we want a little light thing, I guess. When we address an ordained priest, we'll give him, because he deserves at least that honor. He is Father James Martin.
Yeah,
despite being of the lowliest order of ordained priests nowadays.
He needs to really put Fazo in his handle, because it's not listed in here, so I just read it off and then even.
Actually, is he a father? Is he just like?
It's a Jesuit priest, editor at American. Yeah. Also learning to pray and Jesus a pilgrimage. Yeah, he's a priest. He's a father.
He is. Editor at large of the Jesuit magazine America, which is a weird name for a Jesuit magazine. You'd think it'd be more I don't know, something religious in the title, but sure, whatever.
Okay, let's go with Let's go Catholic, secular, Catholic, secular. So let's start with I'll say our screen for the tree I want to open up with. Because this is an obviously stupid one, but it would be kind of fun to whip it a new one. If straight, white, cisgender men could get pregnant, abortion would be a sacrament. Catholics for choice.
Well, you said Catholic secular. I don't really see the Catholic here.
That's a good point.
I see the word Catholic in the screen you're sharing. That's about it, I'm afraid to say. It's
been kind of ridiculous, the number of people that well, I'm Catholic, but, and it's, I think I made the joke at someone on Twitter. It's this idea of when people joke or try and corner people about how to define a woman, and they say as a woman, then is anyone that identifies as a woman. They've sort of done the same thing with Catholics. Like, if you just call yourself Catholic, I guess that makes you Catholic. It doesn't matter anything to do with standing with the church, what you believe, what you do on Sundays. Just if you say you're Catholic, apparently that counts.
Yeah, they've sort of viewed Catholicism. I forget who pointed this out. It might have been Grant or from Contra Gentiles. It might have been someone else who pointed out, these people or at least these specific people, Catholics for Choice and a few others like them, they view Catholicism like we would view being a Jew. Like, there are secular Jews, there are religious Jews, there are Messianic Jews, but they're all Jews. They're an ethnicity. And they're sort of like, yeah, we're Catholics. We belong to the Catholic ethnicity. And I'm like, no, that's not how Catholic. That's actually explicitly not how Catholicism works. I think you'll find.
Yeah. I had a tweet a while ago. For a lot of people, their religion is just an aesthetic for how they look at things. It's an aesthetic of their life and not actually a part of their life. And the Catholic was always just weeks of people who were born and raised, and like Belkov said, ethnically Catholic, which isn't we're not Orthodox. We're not walking into like ethnicities. We're Catholic. It's universal. It's for everyone. It's not. And
yeah, it literally means universal, if I remember
Yes.
correctly.
It's pretty universal. It's
Yeah.
I mean, this one is just like they don't. I don't even know where to begin. Like they don't understand what a sacrament is for one. I think.
Well, they don't understand what a man is. Like,
Exactly. Yeah, like
if
men can't get. It's just
like if a man could get pregnant, he would be a woman. That's
Yes.
like, it's not.
It's so dumb, and there's so many of them are protesting. Like I said before the stream, but I think when here on cast, I saw photos of Catholic patrons outside the Supreme Courthouse. Was praying to like they were just holding the rosary beads, but they claimed they were praying the rosary for abortion.
I do
And
actually
it's just-
pray for very eternal souls that they don't know the words of the rosary and that
Yes.
they aren't damning themselves. I do
Agreed.
actually hope so.
Agreed. I really hope they're just holding it for aesthetic purposes and not actually praying anything,
Mhm.
because that is just it's sad.
I would also say that, I actually quite have a much deeper view of aesthetics than just things I like in appearance and form.
Mhm.
I actually think, ethics can be a part of your aesthetics. I have sort of Scruton's view of aesthetics, which is a sort of homecoming. You make a home out of the world, and that's everything from architecture, painting, decoration, and ethics plays into that. Although you don't choose ethics for aesthetic reasons, but you make yourself at home in the world with them. And these people sort of just take the view of whatever I want, the personal idea of aesthetics, not this objective thing of making a home in the world, and run with it. And there's nothing really, again, it's just there's a form of something there, I suppose, like Catholics for choice. They say they're Catholic. Well, they don't have the form nor the content of a Catholic. Despite saying that, there's nothing there. This just drives home the point to me that St. Augustine was completely right about evil. Evil is nothing. It's just a privation, and they're being privated. I don't know the English word. Deprived. Yes, that's the English word.
Yeah.
Deprived of being Catholics, of Catholicism, of religion. There's not much to do except pray for them. I guess we've already laid out the Catholic position, and just if anyone wants to repeat specific points, and as well I just say that this doesn't really count as a rebuttal.
Yeah,
Even if we accepted their point, in terms of power politics, let's say they were completely correct. Let's say if white men could get pregnant or whatever, then the church would make it a sacrament because it's run by white men. That doesn't make it right. That would actually make Luther correct, by the way.
Yeah.
that's what would happen. Luther would have had a point.
It completely looks like a Catholicism. Like, well, it's not based on truth. It's based on what people in power say it is. Like, it completely disrupts what actually Catholic teaches is true. Catholic teaches things that are true, and they're saying things like, no, to teach whatever the men in power wanted to say, and it's just like by that view, you sound more like a Protestant than a Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
It's just just terrible. Lucio wins. Comments from it's the only time you're gonna get us here now on the podcast. So.
I'll make this bet with Catholics for Choice. If in 500 years or whatever, technology develops where where white men can get pregnant, and they do, and the church does indeed make abortion a sacrament, I will leave in my will that I request all my descendants become Lutherans. I will make this bet with Catholics for Choice. Indeed, the church will have become the great whore of the world. I agree. Luther was right. I was wrong. I'll give him that.
Do you guys know who Settler Lament is?
Yes, Settler's Lament. Is he here?
No,
Someone mentioned him in the chat.
Someone's asking if he's wanting us to get him on because he's like a Catholic NRX guy.
If you guys want him, sure.
I mean, I'm down to talk to anyone who's a Catholic NRX. I don't know who he is, but I'll have to look into that a bit more.
I've only seen a few of his videos. He has talked to Sargon before. I watched that a while ago. But I've only seen his videos before I reverted. So I think I was like, I'm not sure I want to pursue this yet. This was like way before. This was like, I believe 2018, 2019. So I don't know. You can bring him on for the other points as well. So feel free. Anything, and you guys can. I've already hogged enough airtime talking about this, so I'll be quiet now.
Einkath, anything you want to add to this before we move on to Ayn Rand?
The last thing I'll say is we were sort of talking about this culture Catholic idea is like, I'm ethnically Catholic. one, it makes me I really sort of appreciate that I grew up in an area that is not super strongly Catholic. Like I came to the faith in a more genuine way than just like, well, that's what people in this area do. And so I think it's helped me not fall into a lot of those same traps. It's like, no, I sort of need to figure out what my church actually believes, and I don't just sort of do what everyone else does on Sundays. And you mentioned earlier, Kate, about all the Catholics ended up on the Supreme Court. One of which is Sotomayor, who's on the liberal end of things. Like there's a number of the Catholics on the Supreme Court. I'm trying to think who else. I feel like
I think Amy Coney Barrett.
Well, so several of the conservatives are.
Yeah.
But in particular, like I don't know where Roberts came down on this particular. I didn't see the split. I don't know if he was in the dissent or not. He probably was. But just because they're Catholic doesn't mean that they have the right ideas, because they are these sort of culture. Sotomayor is ethnically Catholic. Biden is ethnically Catholic. Pelosi is ethnically Catholic.
Yes.
They think Catholics for choice is a thing that makes sense, because that's okay, I need to be Catholic for my constituency to give me the votes that I need. And it's I feel like that's unfortunately a big problem in parts of the country that are sort of historically Catholic, is they sort of still they sort of wear that garb of Catholicism, and it prevents a lot of sort of genuine conversion and understanding of their faith.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's do Ayn Rand's. I'll read a quote from it, and then I'm also going to make. I'll try to summarize the arguments. I spent the day listening to a lot of Johan Brook and the ilk on it, and it's been
bless
a
your
rough
sacrifice,
day.
Caleb. I don't think I would have
been a rough day.
Sit through that.
I would say I appreciate their openness. Like they outright say pro-abortion is pro-life. Like
at the we have to give us the objectivists. At the very least, they're usually honest.
Yes. Okay, here it is. Ayn Rand. Never mind the vicious nonsense of claiming that an embryo has a right to life. A piece of protoplasm has no rights and no life in a human sense of the term. One may argue about the later stages of pregnancy, but the essential issue concerns only the first 3 months. To equate a potential with an actual is vicious. To advocate the sacrifice of the latter to the former is unspeakable. Observe that by ascribing rights to the unborn, i.e. the non-living, the anti-abortionists obliterate the rights of the living, the right of young people to set a course of their own lives. The task of raising a child is a tremendous lifelong responsibility, which no one should undertake unwittingly or unwillingly. I agree with that part. Procreation is not a duty. Human beings are not stock farm animals for conscientious persons, and unwanted pregnancy is a disaster. To oppose its termination is to advocate sacrifice, not for the sake of anyone's benefits, but for the sake of misery, for the sake of forbidding happiness and fulfillment to living human beings. Okay. Does he again? He doesn't see. I guess he does know where babies come from. He just doesn't like it.
She doesn't want to admit it.
So I'll try and there'll be points to come back on this, but I will want to try and sort of give her the benefit of the doubt. If you were completely strictly adhering to the objectivist philosophy, and it was true that the embryo was just a potential, then I think her and you again completely subscribe to objectivism. Her logic, I think, follows pretty well. Like we mentioned Humanae Vitae earlier. I think you could make a coherent objectivist argument against a ban on contraception. I think that would be a completely coherent position. I would disagree with it for other reasons.
Yeah, I would have to say that if you take that the embryo is pure potential in the same sense that sperm or an egg is pure potential, in that sense, I would say if you accept that, then the logic follows. If an objectivist doesn't accept that, I don't think the logic follows.
Exactly. Yeah. And then that's where she just fails on the basic biology and the understanding of what an embryo is. Because you talk about, okay, is it pure potential? Pure potential isn't a thing. Like if it was purely potential, it wouldn't actually be anything.
Yes, exactly.
And if it's actually something, and it is actually something, you point at it, you refer to it, it's like, yep, that's that fetus. And then the question is, okay, it is actually something. You have to ask, what is it?
Yes. God of Lords, for someone who loves sex so much, he sure does hate the natural outcome.
Isn't that just the perfect indictment of the modern world?
That is incredible. You said if you're on Twitter, man, you gotta tweet that about Ayn Rand. That's incredible. God of Lords.
Camus has a great quote where he says future historians can sum up the present generation. He was writing in the 1950s by simply saying he fornicated and read the newspapers of the average man. It's just such a great quote. Yeah.
I mean, I will point out, he is correct that the task of raising its child is a tremendous lifelong responsibility which no one should undertake unwittingly or unwittingly. I agree.
Yeah.
But if you know what one of the outcomes of sex is possible childbirth, and if you know that, you probably shouldn't be partaking in. You should be having sex.
Go ahead.
No, I also agree that procreation might not be the end of the purpose of everyone. There are people who make celibate vows. There are Chartreuse monks in those Chartreuse in French at least, who indeed are celibate and even take vows of silence outside of singing hymns. There are indeed people who we can say that their end is not procreation and raising up children, but I think that's actually a non sequitur from the argument. Because we're taking the argument of, okay, you are now pregnant. That is, I think, the starting point of the argument, and then we are taking that as a starting point, and a few other starting points, such as what is a human life? That is also another starting point for the discussion. What are the rights of a human, and is the embryo of a zygote or a fetus human? Those are the starting points. You can't just say, well, some people are not meant for procreation. Okay, but that's not what we're discussing at all.
Yes. I mean, see, for someone who, how to put this, again, this kind of shows her lack of teleology. And like before we brought somebody on the roundtable on Buster Selfridge to see rejected teleology for people, only for objects. And she seems like not. You can see it's in a point about sex and about what a fetus is. She seems to her lack of teleology and her philosophy leads to a lot of.
She has teleology, but she has a very weird view of it. Yeah. I think she ascribes it to consciousness, which would explain, because a fetus doesn't. Well, I don't know, but we can't know the quality of a fetus. But from the more common sense view, we wouldn't say, at least it's not prima facie obvious that a fetus has consciousness and experiences qualia. But that's not really what we're. But unless you're an objectivist and you think that all teleology follows from consciousness and all rights follow from consciousness, that's not what we're talking about.
I found it from God the Lord.
Yeah, we commented this on our first roundtable. I use Camus because I would not have found God without Camus. So I think I have some reason to honor and remember him.
And I think at this point I'm just using Ayn Rand as a troll, but whatever.
I love it. The Ayn Rand, she converted when she died. It's like my favorite. When it pops in my feed, I'm always laughing. It's never not funny. It's like, because people always like, people who don't really study Ayn Rand comment like, wait, what? I would love to see a comment under your own book, make pro-life arguments under your own book's post, and then they say, no, she converted. I know, I'm a scholar.
It's like, no, it's fine. Like she changed her mind. Yeah, she figured it out eventually. So,
Saint Rand told me, actually. She went to, I had a vision. Saint Rand came to me in a vision, and she told me, no, I have the source here. My dream diary. Come on.
Oh my god. Oh.
She gets beatified after dying.
What kind of miracles would they ascribe to her? It'd be like, I don't know.
Escaped Russia unharmed.
There we go. Yes. The fall of the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And then like the invention of some like obscure new kind of like weird metal.
She escaped Russia unharmed and became one of America's most famous novelists despite not knowing English when she came there. That's pretty miraculous, I'd say.
True. I would count that.
That's kind of very impressive. I admire greatly for that.
Oh yeah, there's a lot to admire about Rand. I just wish he was.
Yeah, I'm just saying she couldn't have done that without divine inspiration. That's
there
all.
You go. And she, despite understanding so much so well, like she gets arguments like this so wrong. Yeah. And I was going to go back and say this because I keep harping on the fact that I'm really not convinced that she knows where babies come from. Because the commenter said, like she clearly and this came up in Virtue of Selfishness. Like her idea of what sex is for is very much like it's this sort of highest way of like recognizing the good in someone else. And there's no sense that like, oh yeah, that's what makes babies. And in the quote that Caleb showed, it's like, oh yeah, people shouldn't unwittingly and unwillingly become pregnant. And no idea of like, well, how did they get pregnant? Like, okay, if they shouldn't, go through this if it's not appropriate for them. but they never go back and like, oh yeah, like they shouldn't have had sex then. Or like that's where the issue came up. It's not like I think she believes in some kind of weird spontaneous generation where like, just the phases of the moon align in the wrong way. And just like, oh, I guess I'm pregnant now. Okay. I didn't want this to happen. And it's just, it's so disconnected from the marital act. It's just absurd.
Yeah, I think a secular Aristotelian, not necessarily an objectivist, could very easily make the argument, well, you consented to it. You were consented to the teleology. You can back out. Maybe you can, I don't know, seek adoption later, but you can't really back out of, giving birth after this. But they could make the argument that an objectivist, I guess, could make the argument if he believes that all teleology follows from consciousness. If you consciously had sex, then you now have to kind of follow through this. But if you were raped, I guess, then abortion would apply because all teleology follows from consciousness and so on and so forth. If you don't accept that as a secular Aristotelian, then you're like, nope, child's innocent, didn't do anything. Next argument. Yeah,
this what really got me into philosophy was a lot of being pro-life. And the more I get, the more and more I study, the more and more I get into it, the more I'm like, there's less and less good arguments for it. Like a lot of the people is like, well, I'll get to that later. Actually, I will say the bluntness of Ayn Rand about how it's pro-life for abortion is it's clever. I mean, it's honest it's for view at least, and it's a clever way of skating around the issue. There's so many objectivist redefining of language that they. A good example, Kevin Burns. I debated him recently. He's an objectivist from UK about God's existence, and he said existence is everything that exists. To say God doesn't exist, therefore he's not. Since God doesn't exist, existence is all that exists, and God doesn't exist. Existence implies everything that currently exists. God does not exist. That was his argument.
Yeah, that was a very weird series of non sequiturs as well.
It's like God's existence. I mean, his existence exists. Like, doesn't that presuppose where existence came from? Like, you're just like trying to skate around the issue. I think a lot of like objectivism is a great moral. Is not great. It's a decent moral philosophy. It doesn't apply. It doesn't work well anywhere else.
Look, all I'm saying is that God used Ayn Rand to introduce Thomism and Aristotelianism to a whole new generation of Americans, and therefore she should be beatified. She had divine inspiration. That's all I'm saying.
God, the Lord of His what? We got a schizo post you one book about Ayn Rand converting. I mean, like, she asked forgiveness from Pope John Paul II. She converted. I was there on her deathbed. Like, we have God a schizo post you one book because he won't get it.
I could just say it would drive him completely insane.
It would. He actually responded to one of my tweets when I invited him to come on the show, and he agreed to come on and talk about objectivist parenting. When he found out I was Catholic, he would not talk to me anymore. He won't respond to my emails. He won't respond to my DMs. He's ignored me completely because he found out I was Catholic.
That's still very weird.
Was it the story? Was it Rothbard's wife?
Yes.
Yeah, so like the antagonism that objectivists and Rand in particular had for anyone that had any kind that was Christian. So, and if anyone wants to tell the story, like I think I've heard it from one of you originally.
From definitely Caleb. I heard it from Caleb as well.
So they were at Rothbard and his wife was at dinner with Ayn Rand, and Ayn Rand asked Rothbard's wife to renounce Christ. And at the table, because that's what you do. You drink in wine and you go, hey, renounce Christ. Like it's the Pharisees or something. I mean, it's so absurd that she would be that autistic. And when Rothbard's wife said, no, I'm not doing that. She's like, Rothbard, repudiate your wife. And like in front of her at the table immediately. And he's like, looks at her, looks to his wife, looks at her, looks at her, and goes, let's get out of here. This bitch is crazy. And they just left the table. Like, what a Chad. That was like the most Chad thing he could do besides like insulting her. It's like, let's get out of here. Like, not even answering it. It's like, Tanya, this bitch is crazy. Let's beat it. This is incredible.
But it points to something just really kind of perverse in that it's not even the ideology, because I don't think there's anything inherent in objectivism that makes Catholics or Christians particularly loathsome. Because again, like she read Aristotle, she read Aquinas, they were clearly doing good things, but that they were the object of so much scorn and hatred versus the kind of normal imbeciles that she would insult and hate. So it was such a passion that didn't understand the things that Catholics should understand.
But Mises had, yeah, you're right. God of Lords, he did. I think Rand, by the end of her life, just disassociated from Mises because he disagreed with his book Anti-Capitalist Mentality. I remember that. I think I read that somewhere. That he just completely disagreed with his ideas of why people don't reject capitalism. Why people reject capitalism, he just like completely disassociated because this littlest thing would just set her off, and yeah. And actually, that's one thing I do respect about Rand is that he wasn't a fan. He didn't care for oh well, what a diversity of opinions. Like, no, you have to agree with me or leave.
Yeah, no.
I do respect
this
that.
is my covenant community. You will
Yeah.
agree with me.
Exactly. Like, I
She was a
respect her for that.
proto-Hoppian. I love
Yeah,
it.
Rand was the first Hoppian, which Hoppa would hate if
Yes.
anyone ever told him that.
One thing that's great about everyone calls him executivist except Lou Rockwell. I've never heard him. He's almost every book I've read from Lou Rockwell, he brings up Ayn Rand and executivist, but he never says exectivism. He just calls them Randians, which I know he despises that, hated that, and I love that he still does that.
Yes, of course.
Even though he's dead, he's like, no, I'm still gonna use Randian because
Twist the knife. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Lou Rockwell's great.
Yeah, Lou's great, man.
So back because I want to. There's a couple. There's so many things to pick apart in the argument that she makes. I want to. We were talking about the sort of abusive language earlier, and in the quote that Caleb raised, she uses her term sacrifice, or she talks about it's a sacrifice. And as a reminder, what Rand considers a sacrifice is any time that you give up something that you want more for something that you want less.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's sort of implicitly apply, or it's a greater value for a lesser value. And it goes back to, I think, something that we also talked about last time, is that she doesn't really understand that part of human nature, that having a child and having it, grow to adulthood and thrive and have its own children and all that is a pretty important part of your nature. The ability to procreate and leave something to the infinities of time is a really, really important, or should be a really, really high value for you. And for Rand, it just never even enters into the picture, so that she sees, I raised this child, and this is the child is obviously a lesser value than me, which is a complete inversion of every parent that you talk to about what's more important, them or their child. And I don't think they're bad. I think you can make an objectivist argument that your child surviving is more important than you surviving. The good of your child is actually more important than your own good for you.
Yeah, this is why intuitionists, they always start with the very basic case of, if you see a child unconscious, like face down, drowning in a puddle, you have a duty to save it, because it's just so intuitively obvious to all human beings that we should protect children, which is why they usually start with the very basic intuitions that trump other things. Thinkers such as Michael Humer and William David Ross start with that. So it's really there's a denial of the very basic intuitions, I think, as well, that accompany that, because we can investigate, okay, why do we save children? Why are children important? Let's think about that a bit more deeply.
Yeah.
So, and if we're good with that one more thing that I want to sort of focus on from that quote, because again, I think there's just fundamental errors all throughout
over. Yeah.
But she makes the point, I'm talking about, I don't think she calls it the first trimester, but she talks about very early on, and it's well, this doesn't necessarily apply later in pregnancy. But so she sort of has this idea of, at some point it's becoming a person, but still just loses any sense of, so what is it you think that happens? Because she fervently denies any kind of mysticism. The idea of a immortal soul, would repel her more than a cross would. But what magical woo woo does she think happens between when a fetus is 6 weeks old and when it's 6 months old? Then that's what the church noted pretty correctly. Is it grew, it developed, but it's the same thing. You can't point to it and say, yep, that's where it became a person, because clearly, so it must have been a person the whole time. And this isn't a religious argument. This is just, where else could it have gotten personhood from? In a completely materialist sense, if it got it after conception, there's no point to sit there and say, yep, this is a clearly defining line between human and not.
I actually think that if she was alive today, she might point to, I think it's between 10 and 13 weeks where the brain isn't, there starts to be brain activity. And we can say some scientists think that the fetus might be dreaming, or at least has activity analogous to dreaming in, sleeping minds. She might say that's a sign of consciousness. Ergo, after that point, you can't abort, because then you are committing homicide. I think she might say that because she places such a high emphasis on consciousness and on the mind as a material thing.
Yeah.
She might
And
say that.
It would make
To-
sense that he would
To
say
give the
that.
devil his due, or her
It
due.
would make sense that he would say that, but also makes sense that no objectivist today would say that because they're so wrapped into whatever Rand said. Whatever Rand said in the 80s.
Yes.
You know, so it makes sense why your own book would.
Yeah,
still
that's
have
the
this.
weird thing. I would think if you're an objectivist, you at least have to say that after like there's brain activity, after there is some signs of consciousness. Like if it's dreaming, it has a consciousness. You can't like something has to be dreaming. It's not just weird brain activity, or else there is no such a thing as a person from your materialist perspective.
Yeah.
And persons have no rights. If there's a brain and it has brain activity and it's dreaming, there is a something which is dreaming. The something is the person. Even Rand and Brandon sometimes use the word soul in a term to replace consciousness. There's a soul there dreaming. Therefore, you can't abort. But you know, that's the weird thing about Yaron Brook. He took a quote from Rand from like what the 50s, 60s, whatever, whenever she wrote this, and you know, I think she would probably disagree with that if she actually, you know, had the idea that at least there is some brain activity between 10 and 13 weeks, if I remember.
This is the other interesting thing about objectivism, when like as we've talked about, like, you know, it's not its sort of own philosophy. This is what Ayn Rand believed, and anything else is anathema to them.
Mhm.
Is that once she's gone, you can't have new objectivist thinkers in a way, like that. You can't really develop the philosophy because she can't sanction it. Like, you can't actually, you know, have any kind of new growth because it's like, well, would she have agreed with this or not? And that becomes the entire basis of whether or not it's true objectivism or not.
One of the only debates I saw in an objectivist debate was: is objectivism a closed or open system? You know, is objectivism still a growing philosophy, or is it a closed philosophy? And that was like the only time I've seen like an objectivist debate that wasn't like debating over a quote from Rand. So,
yeah, I think Brooke actually argues objectivism is closed, but philosophy isn't. Because he says, you know, Rand defined objectivism as whatever the hell she said. But but philosophy, like he says, she could be wrong. Well, you don't seem to believe that, friend.
I don't dislike. I do dislike you, but I don't hate him. I think he's got his moments where he's I would say a lot of objectivists try to be Ayn Rand. I like that he doesn't try to be Ayn Rand. He very much is himself, which I appreciate. But does anyone here ever watched? He did a series where he rebutted the seven deadly sins.
I have not seen that. No.
He does like a 2-part video where he just goes out like it says all the 7 deadly sins except sloth would be virtues and objectivism. And he also made the argument that the story of God sends Jesus down to sacrifice is a terrible story, and that God was evil from forcing someone else to sacrifice their life. And it's like you just completely misunderstand all of it. Like you just like everything you're reading about, you're not reading in any like understand. You're not even trying to understand the Christian framework at all. And it's one of my biggest complaint about him, that he doesn't even try to put himself in the suit of it as a person to understand it. He just goes from what he's saying to what they say and just moves forward. And it leads to some really, really stupid statements from him.
Yeah, digressing a bit back to when you say, you know, I dislike Yaron Brook, I don't hate him. There's a great quote from our Raphael Lafferty, a great American Catholic fiction writer, who I believe it was in The Devil is Dead. You know, there's a dialogue between two characters, one Christian, one agnostic, and the guy agnostic asks the girl, who is basically his adopted sister, you know, but aren't you supposed to love your enemies? Because she dislikes this other girl a lot. And he's like, yeah, love them, yes, like them, never. The Lord never meant to take all the small pleasures away from us.
I love it. Okay. So this next one, we are done with Rand. Everybody done dunking on Rand?
Well, I am. Eincalf, I think, also took down all the big errors. But yeah, I think, I don't know. I guess the misery qua misery is like, we already talked about language. It's like, no, that is not why we do not want you to be miserable. Much the opposite, please.
She never even brought up adoption as like an option. You know, you could avoid like this lifelong misery. It's like, well, you can avoid that with adoption. Like it was.
I would prefer you raise the child, but if you're going to be that much of a terrible mother, I would prefer the child is living and, you know, in an orphanage rather than dead. I would prefer that, please.
Yes.
And you think something else that you think she would get, and this is because this is an argument that you'll see from less intelligent pro-choice people
Mhm.
is that, okay, the better dead than living in poverty or whatever. And it's like, if you understand, and I think she probably should, that, okay, that there's value in that life, that it can sit there and have its own value once it's conscious, like, it can have value. It's, even if it's, not a happy life, if it's a miserable life, it's still, like Bogakov said earlier, evil isn't its own thing. It's a privation of the good. So not being is obviously going to be worse than being and not being particularly happy. And yeah, so this idea is like, okay, well, if a new person comes into existence and they're not particularly happy, that's somehow worse than them never getting to be at all, which is,
actually, yes. St. Augustine actually talks about this. Is actually his proof of that, one of his proofs, I believe, in the Confession. I believe he has in other dialogues and other books. He goes into it in more length than the Confession. He talks about, well, if we think evil is an actual substance, like we think good is a substance or a thing, or being is good, then if evil was a likewise thing, then something being the most evil ever would actually be better than it being less evil, because it couldn't be corrupted. And therefore that would be a contradiction. So their contradiction is they think the most evil thing from our perspective, non-being, is better than existing in misery. And that is where the contradiction comes in that St. Augustine talks about.
Have we dunked on Rand every single roundtable?
Possibly.
It's been consistent. Yeah.
Consistent.
I mean, and to her credit, the one we actually did on her, on Virtue of Selfishness, we had a lot of very nice things to say.
We had a lot of
and then dunked on her a good bit.
And then dunked. It is, we're nothing if not consistent here at Austro-Thomism.
Absolutely. Let me close the Ayn Rand tab. Next is from Father James Martin, the Jesuit.
Oh, man.
This is going to be a fun one. Let me share this link. Belkov was the one who introduced this one.
Yeah,
so
I love how this isn't even a pro-choice argument. It's just a very weird take that I think deserves talking about, because it's so weird. I even have it open later in case you close it, because this is so bizarre to me.
I'll let you take. Do you want me to read it and you take lead on the rebuttal?
Sure, but you guys can jump in whenever you want to.
Okay. Father James Martin, pro-life? Hours before the draft President Roe v. Wade was published, the Supreme Court issued two sentences ordering a two-sentence order denying a stay of execution for Carmen Deck. He was executed by the state of Missouri the next day. Pro-life means being pro all lives, not just some lives. And then it's a picture of the. Does he have any followers? No, he's just one tweet. Okay, this seems to really be a whole point. Like, a lot of people's critique of pro-life is actually just that you're not pro-life because you're for the death penalty. You're pro-forced pregnancies. So Bokov, take it away.
Well, okay. So we first have to admit that this is not a what would be the word? This is not a pro-choice tweet. I will give this to Father Martin. He and the other article I sent on the chat, they are pro-life. I will give them that. They're at least not in that amount of error. But let's. Okay, so he takes the pro-life position to essentially be pro-life in all cases, and I understand that. I will even grant, because I'm not educated enough to opine on this, I will even grant the Catholic case for forbidding capital punishment. I will even grant that. This is such a complete non sequitur, though, because I think it's also pointed out in the comments that he executed 2 old people in their homes after less than 10 minutes of deliberation, but if we ignore that anyway, and we are against capital punishment, which I'm going to concede to Father James Martin, then this still doesn't follow that we're being at all inconsistent, because we're worried about one grave moral error, and if we believe that capital punishment is another one, then that is a separate issue. It might be that we think homicide is wrong in all cases, even homicide of the guilty, though I'm not sure it would technically be homicide there, but let's say it is, then even in that case, it doesn't follow that this comment has really anything to do with anything. I think he might be pointing out, he might be trying to point out an inconsistency in the Supreme Court, saying, oh, the Supreme Court is pro-life in this issue A, that being of abortion, but anti-life in the other issue. But the Supreme Court, as much, the Supreme Court, as much as they pretend to be God kings, that's not their function, actually. They're supposed to interpret the law, And even if they're against it, the law, at least I believe, allows for capital punishment in this case. So it's wrong on the level of argument, because that is not the argument being presented for pro-life, and it's wrong in the level of political analysis of what the Supreme Court is at least supposed to be, despite the fact that they a lot of times throughout history do make themselves to be Platonic philosopher kings. I don't think, and he's either advocating for them to be Platonic philosopher kings and just decide to, yes, of course, this man should live because we are Catholics and against capital punishment, or he doesn't understand it. So this just confused me on several levels.
Yeah. Before we go into this, quick question.
Also, I should mention that Father James Martin is a Jesuit, in case people are curious. You don't need to search him up. He is, of course, a Jesuit priest. This is unsurprising. Famously, actually, he might be one of the more famous Jesuit priests in America, I believe.
What is the take of you guys on the death penalty? You guys pro or anti capital punishment? Because I'm on the fence. I bounce back and forth every day.
Fence. Of course, I believe in self-defense, so I believe life can be taken under certain circumstances. I'm also of course, pro just war theory. But then again, I think, as David Gordon points out, and as you pointed out as well in the Paleotomism article, under this definition of just war, pretty much no war actually fits this definition. So even if in theory I'm pro just war theory, that doesn't, in practice, I'm pretty much anti-war. So even if we can see just war theory and self-defense, we still have I still think the capital punishment is actually another issue. So I'm still on the fence about it, personally. I still need to read more on the arguments. I know Phaser has a book on it, but I know Phaser...
cover that one day.
Yeah, I'm also aware Phaser supported the Iraq War, which leaves me kind of, okay, yeah. Well, I'll keep that in mind. You're great on metaphysics and theory of mind. I'll keep I'll keep this in mind as I read him, because I think I was very happy with his performance in a theory of mind and in a Five Proofs for God. So it's always good to have evidence that you shouldn't lionize anyone. It's like, okay, I'll keep this in mind as I read this, that this guy might actually be a bit wonky on the I guess the Catholic side of all of it. Although if he hears me say this, he will write a blog post about me, which might be good for exposure, but will leave me pretty much defenseless, since he is a better philosopher than me in every way.
Yes. Anke, what about you? Death penalty or?
Also, probably a little bit on the fence. I think, sort of as the most anarchic of the three of us, I don't really want the state deciding who lives and who dies in general.
That's actually another. Yeah, I was thinking in the perfect ANCAP society, I was thinking that as a given. But everything else is moral. And of course, the state adds moral complications to this, obviously.
With that in mind, and because I've tried to do a lot of thinking about what a moral and sort of ANCAP justice system would look like, and the idea of punitive consequences. I think I'm more on the end of, I don't see a lot of point to punishment as a recompense for some kind of injustice. I think some kind of restorative justice makes a lot more sense in my mind.
Restorative.
I'm not convinced that it might not be okay in some circumstances that even if your life isn't threatened, that it's okay that this person has lost their right to life. Probably something like exile, or kicking him out, even if it's literally to certain death. That's probably I'd probably be okay with that, and not so much capital punishment. But like Olga mentioned, this is not equivalent to saying that you're pro-life in the abortion context. These are no one thinks that the fetus is in any way comparable to someone's maybe this person has through their actions sacrificed their right to be allowed to live in our society anymore.
Personally, I think it comes so I'm anti-death penalty, and then I see videos like the ABC Good Morning America where they brought in the 12-year-old drag queen and everyone's clapping for it, and I'm like, you know what, maybe these people maybe these people. It's like what is how to put this, who I think it was Mizuya Zami or Michael Knows. One of them said it's more merciful to offer someone that last rights than kill him.
Yeah, it might be also more merciful in certain cases. I can see that.
If someone has a mental problem when they are incapable of not wanting to commit more violence, and they have a mental defect that is going to make them unable to not commit more sins. is it more merciful to remove the possibility of their future sinning and give them the last rites of confessing? I don't know. It gets very in the weeds and it's very tricky. I think we should actually eventually cover that book by Ed Faisal, and then maybe come some other like libertarian Catholics who are anti-death penalty, and then look at church history and do a whole like deep dive on the roundtable one day.
Yeah,
That's
I think in this case we don't even need to look for libertarian Catholics, because I think a lot of Catholics, philosophers, and Catholic manuals on this are probably pretty good. Like, we're gonna have to take into the account, as Einkaf said, and that I completely forgot. The state is a moral fact in this. It is not a neutral fact. It is a morally relevant fact of whether this is a thing that should be allowed and that we should advocate for or not. So I understand that. So yeah, I completely forgot about this, but Einkaf remembered it, because I was thinking just in the abstract of everything else, ceteris paribus and everything else, as the economists like to say. I was thinking it in a moral vacuum, but no, there is actually other morally relevant facts that we ignore at our own peril. Yeah.
Okay. Einkaf, anything you want to add to Father James on the issue?
Yeah, one thing, because I think Volga makes a good point, is what does he think the role of the Supreme Court is supposed to be? Because like we pointed out, and like has been pointed out many times, the Supreme Court is not prohibiting abortion. The Supreme Court is literally, they're kind of washing their hands of it, but they're saying this is not a federal issue. This is for the states. We are not doing what the court has done so often, and unilaterally decided this is what the law is going to be. They sort of recognize that's not their place. So you wonder if what he would have preferred is if the Supreme Court had just completely, banned abortion, and that would have been the. But again, it doesn't seem like he's happy about their decision to refer the abortion issue to the states. It's what is it he would want from the court, and it's not entirely clear that he knows what its responsibility should be, or to what he thinks its decision should have been.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much.
Great. I really have nothing to add to. Y'all covered it pretty extensively. I got nothing to really add. So before we go on to the last one about is the Walter Block's evictionism, the libertarian case for the answer to the abortion question. I wanted to, maybe before we go into that, cover one of the more specifically Catholic sides of the pro-life side. Is that there are a lot of Protestants who are pro-life, a lot of secularists who are pro-life, a lot of pro-life people. Majority of Catholics who are pro-life are also anti-IVF, what I think is the logical, consistent position of a pro-life individual. So how do I put this? Here's a good example. Ace, who is great on the abortion issue, for an agnostic secular person, he is really good on it. But he didn't know he didn't care about IVF until he knew what IVF was. And
same here. I didn't know what IVF was. I had some idea of what it was vaguely, but I essentially thought it would be just almost I had this sort of magical idea that it was almost artificial insemination at the moment. So it'd be conception, but it'd be essentially conception, but with health. But then I learned that is not exactly what it is. There are other facts here. So yeah, and then that was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm against it, obviously.
Yeah. So maybe let's explain what IVF is to people who are listening, because it's a very kind of in the weeds issue. So what IVF is in vitro fertilization. When a person has trouble having a hard time conceiving a baby, what they would do is they go somewhere and the guy will then donate his sperm and to donate an egg, and then they in a lab will basically make an embryo and then inject the embryo into the woman. And it's like a higher percentage of it implanting taking place and actually beginning the process. The problem with it is they have to create a whole bunch that not all of them are going to take, and so they normally make like I think the number I read was like 100 or something per person.
Yeah, I had the idea that they would create one. I remember because I learned about it when I was like 13 or something. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, fine. That's fine. That's perfectly fine.
But then they make like 100, and then they freeze 99 of them and let them go bad, or worse, donate them to what's it called? Stem cell research. And so they're making a bunch of fetuses, bunch of embryos, which will become fetuses, basically a bunch of babies, using one, and then donating the rest to science who get, they get cut up and used for stem cells. And so if you want to be consistently pro-life, you have to be against that. And the only real consistent pro-life view is conception.
Yes. That's actually one of the views that I would actually agree with Ace's optimism on technology here, in the sense that, of course, I hope couples who have trouble conceiving that they can conceive, and that I do actually hope that technology improves where IVF, or at least this method of artificial insemination or even in vitro fertilization advances enough that we only need one. I do actually hope that happens. So in that sense, I do share some of Ace's optimism regarding technological advancement.
And they can do it now. It's my thing is now it's like they could, if they wanted to be, they can't be. I don't think you can be Catholic about it because I don't think you can do Catholic artificial insemination because I think it requires the male to act to actually.
Mm-hmm.
And it's awesome. By saying in a secular standpoint, they could make one, just try again. But instead, the heads of their bets to make multiple. I don't think you could justify any rights-based system. I think you can justify that. But anything you want to add on IVF?
So I guess 2 points. One, I think one of the reasons they don't do that currently is and people don't really talk about this. It's an expensive process. Like I think
yes, it is. It is very expensive. On
the order of literally $10,000 per egg kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the more times you have to go in, the more cost you. And I think going in to get the eggs is a pretty invasive procedure. Sperm donation is pretty easy. Egg donation is a process. I don't want to swear this. I might be completely off, but I think I'm pretty sure that if women have this procedure a couple of times or more than 2 or 3 or 4 times, or maybe one time, it's invasive enough that you're going to start doing some damage to the ovaries, to the uterus. It's not the sort of thing you can do over and over again. So they go in once and get everything that they want to get, and try and save some costs. So again, there might be some technological fixes to this. And the other one, like Caleb said, is the Catholic Church still has an issue. Rightly so, is they recognize the importance of the marital act. Is there is something that human nature dictates how we make people, and there's something. And I think go off on a little bit of a biology tangent. One of the reasons they said they would have to make 8 or 9 or 10 of these fertilized eggs because they don't take very often, is because you're not generating healthy fetuses the way that you normally do. You're having to do something very, very abnormal, which doesn't have a particularly high success rate. Is you're sort of having to you're stretching the bounds of sort of what works to make new people, because you're not doing it that's not the way that new people are made, and that's why the success rate is relatively low, and they have to go ahead and do it dozens of times.
And one more thing on the we got a comment here from MPA, ban contraception. And in my company community, yes, I would ban contraception to force people to be more responsible about sex. Secularly speaking, people are too stupid. And I think it's much as I dislike contraception, I think it's not morally except morally right. I'd rather someone who's a condom get an abortion.
Yes. I also think Abelard also makes the point that public law doesn't necessarily punish sins accordingly; they punish public wrongs accordingly. So he brings up the point that burning someone's shed or part of their house while no one's there, harming no one, is actually a less grievous sin than fornicating in a church. But we should punish public law should punish the arsonist more than the couple fornicating in the church. He sort of said, leave that one up to God, is basically what he said. Yeah, God is the I think he gives God the title of the examiner of the heart and the reins. And so in that sense, I also agree.
Yeah. Dude, back in my...
It's a nice libertarian argument there, is the role of law is to protect personal property and to adjudicate disputes among people, not to legislate morality. Like you said, that's God's responsibility. And I think the liberty position is certainly consistent with that idea.
Absolutely. Yep, dude. Speaking of sex inserts, my old Protestant inserts, the amount of car sex that was going on in the parking lot before youth group. I mean, it was bad. That's where I'm not making this up. There would be youth workers, the adults and stuff, in the parking lot. That's how bad it was. They'd go to the parking lot, knock on the window, get back in church. It was bad.
Get back in church.
I knew a guy who actually he was in a car with sick, and a friend of mine's mom had knocked on the window and go, I'm telling you, Mom, get back in church.
Well, I guess if you don't remember anything for confession, that's a quick fix.
Confessing in Protestant church. It's just and the other thing I want to bring up is on the contraception standpoint is Plan B pills.
Plan B what?
Plan B pills, the day after pills, kind of sad.
Oh, okay.
Plan B, if the condom breaks, you use Plan B or day after pills.
Okay.
My understanding, I could be wrong on this, but I think this is my understanding of how pregnancy. Well, it takes up to 24 hours for the sperm to reach the uterine wall in the eggs. Am I correct on that? And you may know the.
I don't know the exact time, but the idea is that the sperm fertilizes the egg, and then there's some lag between that and the egg the fertilized egg implanting itself in the uterine wall.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that the idea of a Plan B pill, why is a contraception I'm not a fan of, it is not an abortion pill. It is Plan B to find a solution. No, it's not Daniel. So by Plan B prenatal pills are not abortion pills like a lot of people think they are. They are just a late stage contraception. And so if they were abortion pills, obviously they'd be bad because they're a late stage contraception. I think they would be an acceptable counter in a secular sense, an acceptable countermeasure to an abortion. Anyone here disagree on that? Or everyone agree
yeah, I don't know if I would say it's worse than condoms. I think it would be on the same level of moral disorder. I think that's the correct term at least. As a condom, but it wouldn't be obviously homicide as abortion is.
Yeah. And the reason I'm bringing these up is I want to make sure people who are like listening, we are Austrian Thomists, we are a lot of us are in the libertarian space. We're not saying we need to make a federal ban on all contraceptions because we understand there are things that are worse than there are sins, but abortion is worse than using the contraception.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in a secular sense if you're not Catholic. Like it's Plan B doesn't consistently work women's 150 pounds. Fun fact. Well, ladies, if you want to have promiscuous, first of all, Kelsey D, this implies women over 150 pounds get laid. No, I'm being a dick. No, it does. Yeah, well, this is if you're gonna have promiscuous sex, you should actually be safe about it. Then you should lose weight. I'm getting a little mean about it, but that's my answer to that one. Yeah, I'm trying to make some people that can't come in here and just be like, oh, you guys just want to ban contraception and ban all forms of sex happening. It's like, yes, but we're not going to be that dick about it. We are going to be understand there's a secular world, this is a government, there are limitations on outlawing sins. There are steps here we're trying to make it work. I was trying to hedge our bets against some objections people could raise against us. Anyone have any comments on anything before we move on to the evictionist one?
No, I think we're good to go on to Block.
Okay, who wants to summarize Walter Block's evictionism?
Not me, because I haven't actually read his original arguments. I've only seen his debates, and I don't actually think I can give a non-biased account. I can give a very simple one, but I think you two are probably more equipped here.
I guess you want to take this one. Or you want me to?
First, I'm going to respond to the comment in the chat real quick. The Plan C contraceptives being over 150 pounds. I think it's like Plan, like it goes up like bra sizes. Like if you're over like 250 pounds, you need Plan Double D, Plan F. Thank you. So I haven't read Walter Block's arguments in a long time. I remember like when I was first sort of getting into libertarianism and reading a whole lot of Mises.org. I came across Walter Block's argument, and that was the thing that gave me the most pause of like, okay, there's something wrong with these people. Like I liked so much, and it just, and I couldn't even. It took me months to sort of realize, okay, this is exactly what I hate about this argument. But that's when I encountered it. So that's all a way of saying it's been a little while since I've seen it. Basically, I think Block's argument is that we can equate we treat the fetus as if it were a tenant. It's taking up residence. And the mother is effectively a landlord for this baby. And so the conditions under which the mother could remove its tenant are the same under which a landlord could evict their tenant. I think he gives the example, if it was, the middle of Siberian winter and it's negative 60 degrees outside, you can't just open the door, kick them in the butt and say, okay, yeah, I guess you have to, you're essentially killing them at that point. You can't just get rid of them. But as soon as it's not homicide to evict them, you are perfectly within your rights as the landlord over that baby tenant to remove them whatever you want to and under whatever conditions you want to. I think that summarizes it pretty decently. Yeah. If anyone has anything you want to add, please feel free.
So I don't have any issue with the second half of evictionism. Actually, I would prefer mothers bring the baby to full term, but if the options are again abortion or we move it in artificial room and it comes to life, I don't like it, but I much prefer it to abortion. My issue is how it's like my big problem with objectivism is one, it is yes, Nolan's right. It is the most Jewish argument for Boston I've ever.
Yes,
Yeah, it's
indeed it is.
My problem with it is that it's a legal ethic and to a moral question. I don't like when people try to remove a philosophical moral question. Like, well, how legally is how it should work and stuff, because that seems like you're placing your legal ethic above what is moral, and it should be the other way around. Your morals to influence the legal ethic, not vice versa. But that's what doesn't. I don't think it follows from property rights per se. Like his idea, like,
Never do I.
you have the right to evict the tenant regardless of circumstance because it's your property. Property rights above all else. And it's like, well, and this is Ace's example. If someone puts a baby on your doorstep, you can't just kick it in the traffic. You
Yeah,
can't just kick the baby in the traffic because it's trespassing. It's like, well, no, you have a responsibility as a human being to actually, take care, find a mother, find where the baby goes, put it up for adoption. You can't just, especially if you invite the baby. This was Dave Smith's example. That if you have a hot air balloon, you bring someone into the hot air balloon, and you go 50 feet in the air, you have then assumed responsibility of that person's life by inviting him into your hot air balloon.
Mm-hmm.
And even if someone put a person in your hot air balloon, you don't want them there. Well, you have to go back to the ground before you can put them out, because otherwise you're just accessory with someone's murder. Like it what happens when you artistically put property rights above all else. And it's like, no, property rights are good. I think they're great, but you can't just have property rights above all else. You have to temper that with actual decency and actual morality.
There are qualifiers to the use of property, in the sense that, like, you can't just kill someone who like puts their foot on your property and you don't like it. Like, you can't just shoot him through the head. Like, even though it is your property, you can expel them, but you have to use but proportionality is a factor. And as much as you might not like the fetus, I do not think that even if we grant trespassing, I don't think the argument goes that far. I don't think we need to grant trespassing. But even if we do, you don't get to kill it. I guess maybe if we grant trespassing, we can say that if there are artificial wombs, you can then remove it and place in a womb if you do it safely and don't injure it. And the womb and the artificial womb is, I'd say that the artificial womb has to be as good as a real womb first, actually. Yeah. Then I can concede that is a valid thing, because again, I prefer the baby live rather than not. But I don't think it follows from property rights at all, actually.
Yeah, agreed. Eincast?
So I want to respond to MPA as a comment about walk up to a girl and say, "Hey, girl, can I rent out your womb?" That's called surrogacy. That's a pretty common practice at this point. It's essentially, I mean, like, literally is a thing that gets done right now. So my big issue with the Blockian evictionism argument, and I bring this up in the I get to pimp out my God, I can't think of the words right now. I get to shill and grift on my own other products. The article that I wrote for Austro-Thomism a while ago about the family, pretty timely, because I think it was just before the Roe v. Wade stuff came out. But I mentioned evictionism specifically because it's just so confused in our terms of understanding. Is I can't sit there and say, well, okay, a mother and their infant is like a tenant and a landlord, because it's exactly opposite from how I actually understand things. I don't know tenant and landlord first. I know mother and child first. One of the first things, the first sort of social arrangements that a baby is aware of is, oh, that's mom. Like it is part of the fundamental human relationship, that being the mother, father, and child, and all of our other social interactions we know from that most generic one that we know first, and everything else grows from that. So these ideas of saying, like, okay, a womb is like a hot air balloon, or a womb is like an apartment, or a womb. And no, a womb is a womb. Like this, you are making a new child. You have this fundamentally different relationship between, or this unique relationship between a mother and their child. That you can't sit there and say, well, okay, legally it's kind of like this. Like, the legalism should come from the understanding of reality, and the reality is this is a primary relationship.
And just to go for a reduction ad absurdum of Hoppe's argument, if we do indeed grant that landlord and father, or landlord and father and landlord and mother are equivalent terms, then God arbitrarily chose father in heaven instead of landlord in heaven to describe himself. And you say, if he had described himself as landlord in heaven, which would have been very, very funny if that's how he described himself in the Old Testament to the Jews, and would have explained a lot. If that, I have to see translations of the Talmud to see how they render the word father nowadays. But that you would have to say that morally we lose no moral content from the change of father in heaven to landlord in heaven, which is a pretty insane claim to make.
Yeah, I will say once I love Walter Block. I'm not wrong. I enjoy his books, his articles.
Yes.
I think he's incredible. Evictionism is just really cringe. But I would say his joke about like when, according to the Talmud, a fetus is inviolable to his graduated medical school is an amazing joke. Like there's no denying that is an incredible joke from him off the block.
So it reminds me. There's a comedy skit. I think it's a Canadian group called Three Dead Trolls in a Baggie, and they have this skit from. I'm dating myself. I think it's from the '90s originally, but it's this sort of monologue of this old farmer types. Like, wife came to me one day, said we were going to have a kid. I was a little bit skeptical, but by the time he was 3, we had him, plowing the fields. And by the time he was 8, he was, up on the thresher. Then, he turned 17 and said he was going to go to the city, and there's nothing I could do about it. That's when we decided to have the abortion. Because if they ain't voting, they ain't human.
But yeah, it's like a viewing, if someone described Our Lady as like a landowner or something, like that is the exact incorrect view of Our Lady and of God.
Well,
so I'm sorry, I don't want to belabor this too much longer, but I think like that point gets missed so easily. Or so readily that there's something special about the nuclear family. That is a special relationship, to the point that and I mentioned this in my article, that I don't think a lot of people, libertarians and people in libertarian, don't really get how kids work, and they don't really understand what a family is. To the point that the sort of things we typically think of, property rights, the NAP, don't really apply the same way within a family. Your obligation to your child is actually a lot higher than the one given by the NAP. There is a real obligation there. How is it? Can it be socially enforced? Is it what happens in Ancapistan? I think there's some open questions, but morally there is clearly a higher standard and an overarching a supersedent standard that affects the way that a mother has to treat their child or a father has to treat their child. And to reduce that, it's like, well, okay, well, if a landlord can do it, why can't mom? It's legalism to the point of giving up on reality. Is you've stopped understanding what human beings are.
Yeah. I'd also like to just make the comment before someone misinterprets nuclear family to say we're against extended families, is that when we mean nuclear family, we're usually, or at least hopefully, we're referring to the nucleus, the solid nucleus of the atom. If you remember, the electrons orbit the nucleus of the atom. We're not against those things. We're not even against that if the nucleus is incomplete, that there shouldn't be other members of the family there trying to fill the void, grandfathers, uncles, aunts, whatever. We're just saying that we think the nucleus is the most important thing, and it should be whole.
And I'll go beyond that. When the thing for that nuclear means to me is that it's indivisible. You can't take away one of the members of the nuclear family and have it still be a family.
Yes,
you can have an extended family, and okay, grandma dies. I don't have an uncle. I don't have you still have a family. When you no longer have mother, father, and child, if you get rid of one of those, it's not a family anymore. Like you can't. The idea of family stops making sense if you get rid of something that is part of the nuclear family.
Yeah. It's actually one of my points. I'm working on a book right now, and it's on the state's war on the family. And when I first talked about it on Twitter, everyone was talking about nuclear family. It's like it seems like specifically in America, at least, people have completely rejected and ignored the idea of the extended family structure. Like it's not brought up and really focused on. I would prefer extended big family structure than a nuclear family. Just the small.
Absolutely. The point being that they're not in conflict.
Exactly.
The extended family contains the nuclear family. Like the extended family is wonderful. Having grandparents around is an amazing thing. Having lots and lots of family that's close to you, and that you have a community there, is a really good thing. The nuclear family is not in conflict with that.
Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely not. It's
Okay, we've got trolls now. What happened? We've gotten big enough to get trolls.
it's amazing. I love this. This is great. Okay, well, we've gone for an hour and a half. Before we wrap up, what is the most frustrating pro-choice argument you see?
Oh
Bokov,
man.
go first. What do you got? What is the most frustrating pro-choice argument you see?
I guess the most frustrating one. The one that most frustrated me when I think I saw it, might have been over a year ago or something. It was when Ace was debating abortion, and someone refused to understand, because Ace was doing it from the libertarian point of view, and someone refused to understand that even though I agree, at least you are your body in a sense, you are the form and matter of your body. You know, we agree with hylomorphism here if we're Austro-Thomists. Or at least to St. Thomas's view of hylomorphism. Like, even then, if we're going in legalistic terms, you also own your body, even though you are it. And someone was refusing to see Ace's point that you can't just expel people from your property by killing them. And that idea of like, well, I am my body, therefore I get to do whatever I want with it under any and all circumstances. And to deprive me of that is to fundamentally violate me in some way, is so frustrating because it refuses to get the point. It refuses to concede. It refuses to concede that maybe your pleasure doesn't supersede all other considerations and all other duties and all other things. And it's just me all the time, and it gets so annoying. There's other takes, but they're usually like, the pro. I think you mentioned, the pro-lifers. I don't see them, doing adoption or supporting adopt. It's like, well, actually, we do, but whatever. That's a different. Those are very, very annoying in themselves. But the fact that I've seen someone argue for hours with Ace on this, just back and forth without moving a single inch, I'm almost impressed by their stubbornness.
Agreed. Einkath, what about you?
So real quick, I want to respond to Triple Daniel's question and just say yes, and leave no further no more argument required. I'm not going to give the most annoying one, but the one that has been the most hilarious to me, especially in the last couple of weeks, is when pro-choice people sort of rediscover traditional morality. It's like, well, if we're not going to have abortion, then men should be required to give child support and support women for from the moment of conception all the way. And like, it's like, yep, agreed.
Yes,
yep,
indeed.
We're getting rid of abortion is going to get rid of promiscuous sex. Great,
yes,
sounds good
thank
to me.
You.
What people are going to do? Only have sex with people that want to have children with? Like, it's just they make all these arguments. Like, sounds good.
Sounds
great,
good.
love it,
I'm
wonderful.
That actually makes the argument for us because we could say, like, in a vacuum, let's pretend we had no contact with the other side of the issue. In a vacuum, said, well, abortion. If we prohibit abortion, that would lead to a downfall of promiscuous sex. And maybe some people say no, they just have a bunch of children running around and they can continue having promiscuous sex. But from the mouth of the people we are talking about, the people who do have promiscuous sex, they're saying no, we will stop having promiscuous sex, and we're doing this as a threat to you men. And it's like, okay, well, the incentives align. We are correct about the incentives, at least. That's good to know.
Yes, I think for me the most frustrating one is before I get into that, on the comment of sex strikes, people offering to do sex strikes, which is like, yes. There was a guy who was like just a hideous looking dude who was saying when you go on a sex strike, and the great El Popo commented about, like, posted his profile pic and said, you're going on a sex strike? I don't think that's your choice. And then the guy commented about, you're just scared of women owning their bodies. And Popo was like, no, I'm just scared you're the gayest dude alive.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then the guy was like, maybe guy did the whole liberal, at least you can admit you're in the closet, and I hope you get better one day.
I think Steppy, this was either this one, I also stepped into that one, but Steppy posted underneath that, it was not Google, but it was essentially a search engine. He searched up gayest guy alive, and it returned that guy's username.
Popo and got a domain for www.gayestguyalive.com and it's hyperlinked to the guy's Twitter account. This is the greatest. You can't come back from that. The dude bought a domain name. You can't come back from that one. It's over.
That was really, really funny. That
Wait,
was
you want to hear? Kelsey D, trust me, spend an hour in a Catholic church choir room. You never need another kind of bus control ever again. True. My church is full of babies now, which is kind of nice, but none of them shut up. This is I love baby babies are great, but they're gonna. My problem is they start crying, and they have the choir room. The mothers will always take them to the choir room, but they always take like 10 minutes to decide if they're gonna take them to the choir room or not.
It's so
And
funny.
that's
Like before I was married with kids, like just had this visceral reaction to crying in church, on airplanes, wherever. It's
Mhm.
like take them to the car room. It's what it's for. Cry. And now that I've got two kids, I'm like, oh, they're so sweet.
Yes.
Those poor
Yeah.
kids. Like it's like I just my heart melts every time. Like, oh, those poor parents, they're having such a hard time, and I could not care less whether they like
Yeah.
it take
I
20
actually
minutes to get
always
them out
have
of there.
I always have a smile on my face when I see the young children there, even if they're kind of crying.
maybe I don't have kids yet, but I hear a crying noise and I'm like, leave.
And it's really, really funny. I think one of my experiences, I went to an Augustinian chapel because we have a lot of religious schools here. So we have a Saint Ignatius, Saint Augustine, and there's one more which I forget. It might be, is it Saint B? It starts with B. It might be Bernard Bartholomew. I forget what it is. But yeah, I went to the Saint Augustine Chapel recently, and all the Augustinian priests, for some reason, are from Spanish countries. So they speak Portuguese with a heavy Spanish accent. So it's already hard to understand them. And then there's the baby crying. But somehow I always get the important parts of the sermon. And like I remember I went there, and this was one of the services during which I cried. And I was like, okay, this was very good. Okay, yeah, kids are fine. Because already I couldn't understand the boring parts, but I understood all the important parts. Okay, this is really, really good.
My priest in my church is a very, very old man from Poland, and he speaks very softly with a heavy Polish accent. Great dude. I absolutely adore him and love talking to him, but he is the softest speaker I've ever heard. And he speaks softly, and you hear the accent more in the words. And it's just when someone starts crying, you have no idea what he's saying.
Yeah.
So he knows it too, because the baby crying. Sometimes you kind of just stop for a moment and wait for the quiet down to continue. Which I appreciate him doing that, but I gotta feel bad for the parent making if his baby's quiet, it's making the priest stop the homily for a moment.
I remember my mother. She mentioned a priest because she also went to a Catholic university, and she used to go to the mass there because they had a church there. And I remember she was friends with this priest. But I remember he'd always make a joke. I forget what it was when the baby was crying, and just sort of lighten the mood. It was great. Probably I might actually meet him next week if he's still around. He's probably 90 now.
Nice.
Father Paul, actually.
Father Paul, good name.
I
think
very,
for me,
very good name.
My most frustrating abortion argument is probably the I don't know what to say, but the my body, my choice. That one gets to be the most infuriating to me because it's so just like it's a staple that's just so easily proven. Like, well, it's not just your body.
Yeah, it's for chance as well.
Or that one. And what really grinds my gears is someone says, I see this a lot on Facebook. Getting rid of Roe v. Wade doesn't get rid of abortion. This gets rid of safe abortions. And it's like this. What the fuck is a safe abortion? Describe to me an abortion that doesn't involve the death of something.
The mortality rate for abortions is 1.
Yes.
At least at a minimum.
Yeah, it's so. One that's the weirdest to me might be the safe, legal in Wales. Like nobody wants more abortions. Like, well, why? Like if abortion is not murder, you should be as far as much minutes you can have. But if you think there's something wrong with it, that you want less of them, then what you're implicitly saying it's wrong to do them, but you're gonna place other goods above life. This seems really weird to me.
Yeah, we have to realize that safe, legal, and rare was a purely rhetorical move meant to sway Christians over because of the coat hanger abortion thing, which was like, okay, well, if we take for granted that the same quantity of abortions will happen if we make it legal, then they're appealing to our desire not to hurt more people than have already been hurt and killed by it, by at least making it safe.
Yeah.
That is not how it works, I would say, at all. That is just a rhetorical move meant to trick you and to sway your sympathies over. That is it. They do not believe it. Maybe a few do. I'll grant that. Maybe a few people are taken in by their own lives. But it is first and foremost a purely rhetorical move meant to sway you. Don't believe it.
Yeah,
So I've made a response to this before, and I'm not going to repeat it here because it's every time I do it, people just like look at me like I'm the most horrible person alive. But the short way of looking at this is apply this to any other violent crime.
Mm-hmm.
This is like, okay, well, we also want, we don't want, outlawing murder isn't going to get rid of murder. It's just going to get rid of safe murder.
Yes.
It's would this fly for any other act that you think is a violation of someone else? We don't want to get rid of arson. You're getting rid of outlawing arson doesn't get rid of arson. It just gets rid of safe arson.
Yes, exactly.
It just apply this to any other situation where something horrible is happening. And would you agree with it in that case? Why is this one special?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we got some comments here I want to answer real quick. There's an article from a website recently saying that if they outlaw abortion in your state, there is a type of horse medicine that
my motherboard,
treats
Vice's tech subsidiary, or not subsidiary, but Vice's tech branch. I might, I might actually try to find it because that was
while you search for it.
So while you answer, I'll try to find it.
It's so ridiculous that the left is just like, oh, well, now you gotta take this veterinarian horse medicine because it treats ulcers in horses that will induce an abortion, and it's like condoms not that expensive, people. I guarantee you, it's more expensive to buy this.
Okay, I'll send you the link right now if you want. We can read it because this is pretty funny. You want me to put it in? I'll put it in private chat.
If you send me the link, we'll do that after we have a few more comments. I want to go through.
Yeah, I send it in private chat. I'll also send it in the Paleotomism thing.
And
this is pretty insane.
The next
I want to add something else, just because this made me think about it. Is looking at the Hippocratic Oath. Originally explicitly had a line in it about that you wouldn't help women have abortions. Like this is something that every doctor swore to at some point, and they sort of got rid of this. But there was this implicit understanding that there was something wrong with trying to doing exactly what these people are doing, saying, well, if you take this, it'll cause an abortion. Like this was up until literally within the last decade or so. This was every doctor swore they wouldn't do this, and now it's just common practice.
Yeah. From Nolan. From the hard decision a woman can make to enjoyed by millions.
Mm-hmm.
That makes me sad.
I think also someone in the chat, I think Kelsey D may asked, do you believe in any exceptions for early term abortion being legal? No. Again, the Randian argument, the objectivist argument, if objectivists weren't Randian sycophants, would be 10 to 13 weeks there's brain activity, therefore versus consciousness, therefore before that point abortion is allowed. But because that's not our view of what a human is, just the pure consciousness. But I would actually, using Peter Geach here, if man is a rational animal, again, we're talking about the moral kind of man, not just a biological kind. The moral species of man is the rational animal. And so if aliens are also rational, they are also men in this sense. Then rationality is the ability to acquire capacities which use reason. Because even when you're an adult, you might not have other capacities that you later can have, or even a child will not have all capacities, a child of like 5, because, we would also count fetuses as children. A child of 5 does not have all the rational capacities that an adult can have, but they have the ability to attain it. So they have the potential is there, and the actual of the soul is already there for that potential to be there. So no, we would Randian might make the argument that early term abortion should be legal. We would not make that argument. We would be explicitly against.
So and I want to add in here because she mentions later talking about ectopic pregnancies. And Bulgov, I think you mentioned that in Brazil there's like a couple of cases where abortion can be legal.
Yeah, I believe it's 3 cases if you want me to spell it out.
Please go right ahead.
So in case of rape, in case of I'll just say in Portuguese, anencephalia, which means in Latin, no brain. So the child is not alive. Like if you give birth to it, it will just come out. It's basically a stillbirth. It's dead. In that case, you can abort. And the other one, I believe,
it's threats to the life of the mother, right?
Yeah, if it threatens the life of the mother. If there's a grave threat to the life of the mother, that's the only. All other cases are outlawed.
Right. And so I'll say, first of all, that second case, I think that's not really abortion. Like there's nothing good for you to kill.
That is not abortion. Yeah. It's just, it might be the same medical procedure in a sense, but it is not abortion, I would say.
Yeah.
And I would make an argument for that third case. We can talk about the morality of it and what one should do if their life is threatened and they're pregnant. I would take the stance that trying to legislate that would probably be beyond the
Yes.
capacity of the state. I think if the life of
would
the
agree
mother
with
is
that.
threatened, that's a difficult place to sit there and say no. You have to clearly risk your life for this child. So
Yeah, no.
because
Of course,
I think that's the
yeah.
case that she's trying to make there, and I think we would. Caleb, maybe you disagree, but I certainly don't see a case for outlawing
Yes.
abortion when the mother's life is threatened.
Yeah, I agree with Einkath there.
I think I would agree. I think I would agree with y'all. I will say that it's getting less and less because of the medical technology. So that's like one of my. This is the only part that like I agree with Sparta Block that as technology progresses, the view has to change because abortion is a medical procedure. So as technology progresses, it gets safer and safer and safer. But only in those rare cases like that, I would agree with y'all.
Yeah, of course, I would also make the caveat here that it is morally superior. It is more virtuous if you do give your life for the fetus. I think there was the example of, I believe it was a Polish sportswoman, Olympic athlete, actually, who had cancer, and she was also pregnant, but the chemotherapy would kill her child, so she decided not to have it and died shortly after birth. That, I think, is more, it's incredibly virtuous. It is incredibly self-sacrificing. And it's, beyond admirable to do something like that. I believe one of the Catholic saints of the 60s or 70s was an Italian woman who actually a similar thing occurred to her where she decided to basically she preferred to die over killing her own child. But I would not outlaw it as much as I might think that it is. I even understand it. I have hard time condemning it because if I was a woman in that position, I might fear for my life enough or cling to my life enough that I would do the same. But I think I can make, even then, I can say that I would be less morally virtuous than if I decided to give my life for this.
Raises the question, like, is the law meant to like prevent evils or enforce virtue? I think that's like a question with a lot of laws, but is a law meant to like prevent you from punish you from committing evil acts, or is it meant to like enshrine and force you to do a virtuous act? And I'm much more go to the side that it's meant to just prevent evil.
Yeah, I'd say prevent evil and restorative justice mostly.
Okay, so, we got a lot of comments. I was gonna wrap it up like 20 minutes ago, and everybody's commenting. It's like, well, we're gonna keep going, I guess. Jacob, what is a clouded human? Define that one for me real quick, but I want to know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm not sure what he means there.
Yeah,
search it up.
He's probably drinking that blueberry wine because he got a sponsor. But he's sponsored by an atheist, so I'm not gonna respect it.
No, I think we should probably just ban him now that he's been on Tower Gang.
No, I think I'm gonna put him in timeout. Put you in timeout.
So he can't tell us what he meant. Great.
Exactly.
You're just trying to rev the podcast. It's clever. I respect the hustle, but
he finally made the Tower Gang. I don't know why he would ever want to go on that show in the first place. It's void.
Yeah, I think anyone who's ever appeared with any of those people should just be banned forever from this channel.
I agree.
Particularly Jose.
Oh, grounds for excommunication, really.
Not all bad. Who was it?
We still have the Motherbird article if you want.
Cloned. Okay, you meant to say cloned.
That makes a lot more sense.
Okay,
yes,
this is going to get really deep into like philosophy of the mind and the immortality of the mind. Like, can you clone the immortality of the mind? And like, can you clone a soul? I don't think you could because of the immortality.
I think process. Cloning, as far as I'm aware, is essentially you make the same. I forget the process. I learned about it way back in like high school biology. But of the case of like the famous case of a cloned sheep. But it's a different sheep. It's not the same sheep. It has different tendencies. Like it has the same, I guess, biological imprint. But it's like it's different. It was raised in a different place, different time. It's slightly different. It might have been grown up to like it has certain attachments to whoever cloned it versus the original sheep who has attachments to whoever raised it, and so on and so forth. I don't think we can say it is the bilocation of the soul. I don't think we can say that.
And God of Lords makes the point about identical twins. Like it's the same sort of idea. Like obviously identical twins are not, there's two souls there. I think the clone case is interesting because it sort of points to sort of the weirdness there is, when does the human become ensouled? But as soon as that cloned human is its own human, and again in the cloning case it gets a little more ambiguous because there's no conception. But at some point it would probably, if it grows into a human, it's going to call for a soul from God will ensoul it, and then it is a person. again, the fact that we don't really understand a lot about what's going on even biologically in that case, sort of that's one of the reasons that it's sort of frowned upon as a practice. But
yeah,
if you were to clone a person, it would just be another person.
Yeah.
How to put this? Do we
Just
have any?
remember that Eve was taken from Adam's rib, and she was not Adam.
Yeah. Do we have any reason to believe there would be a how to put this? Is there any reason to believe God would ensoul a clone? Like is that like,
Yes,
how would we?
I think.
I think we can make an argument for that, but I think that really comes down to like what is to yeah. I'm too exhausted to even begin to really think about that one.
So if the clone physically has a human nature, like if it has all the things that physically it needs to be human, it would call for a soul by its nature.
Yes.
point.
So the same superforming action of God that ensouls us would be called for in that case as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, yeah, I think I agree. I'm exhausted. I had friends over last time. We stayed up way too late. Let's wrap this up with that article that we have here. Let's wrap it up on a high note about laughing.
We could just read the thread. You don't even need to click the article, but the thread it's like free tweets. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
It's such a good presentation.
It has to be a troll, right?
No, you don't even need to read the article. Go to the tweets.
What's the tweet? Hold on.
Yeah, I put it in Paleotomism and in the private chat of the Streamlabs. Just open it up. You don't need to read the article. Tweets are the funniest part. Trust me.
Say, what is it? See a screen. Chrome tab. Okay, Mr.
Misoprostol, I think.
Misoprostol is relatively easy to acquire from veterinary sources, since in addition to medically inducing abortions, it's also used to treat ostriches and horses.
Go to the second tweet, please.
You may be reminded of ivermectin was used to control pets and horses, and it became favored by, but an ineffective co-treatment among conspiracy theorists.
The main
difference here is that Misoprostol does something other than giving you just shit.
Third tweet, please. If
in a progressive just word, abortion be free and safely administered.
Free too.
Oh my God! By medical professionals, the attack on abortion access don't stop abortion. This leads to less safe alternatives.
Oh man, what a series of.
Can't make it up.
Can't make
the
it
site
up.
is free. These guys are great.
Oh man.
Oh, I'm gonna give them a like.
Yeah.
Oh my God! I can't believe the left, man. I don't. Oh my God, the left.
The balls required to post this are kind of really, really impressive. I've got to say. Oh man,
it's so to wrap this up. Abortion is wrong. Pro-choicers are dumb. Ayn Rand and where babies came from, and Walter Block is very, very Jewish. We have anything else we want to add to this before we wrap it up, guys? Or do y'all want to boost it for 7 minutes and make it to 2 hours? I'm down for boosting for 7 minutes.
I don't care about hitting 2 hours. I think we can wrap it.
Okay.
I think we're leaving it on a high note.
Yes,
agreed.
Indeed, we are.
Okay, y'all give your plugs. Let's get out of here.
Sure. I'm at available username on Twitter. I should probably put it in the Streamlabs handle as well. Next time I'll do it if I'm not too lazy. I'm right for Paleotomism.com, also known as Austro-Thomism. And I'll be coming out with another article hopefully next week.
Awesome.
On nature of good and evil. So that's about it for my plugs. I only write for Paleotomism, and I only have a Twitter account. Don't have anything else to shill. About it for me.
Uncast?
At Eincath on Twitter, anarchocatholic.substack.com. Also a writer for Austro-Thomism, nay Paleotomism. I should have as soon as Caleb figures out how to work his computer, the actual domain name will change as well. Let's see. I'll also have an article coming out probably on owning atheists since Jacob couldn't manage it for us. I'm gonna have to take the reins and demonstrate how to destroy atheist arguments based on a recent Twitter argument that I had. So
yeah, I saw that. That was great.
That was fun. Really so I'm hoping it turns into a nice article. So that'll probably come up sometime next week.
Awesome. Okay, guys. Well, this has been an episode of Austro-Thomism. Like, comment, share, subscribe, the whole 9 yards. if you get this
Please
account
do
to
subscribe. We're getting in a milestone, right?
yes, we'll get to myself. This one gets if I get 8 more subscribers on this account, I can sync it up to Odyssey. We'll be on Odyssey and YouTube. I will be uploading this to Spotify as soon as I find the time to actually do it. Yeah, we're on all the podcasters. We're on paleotomism.com. The link is in the bio. Follow us on Twitter at Austro-Thomism. Yeah, go become Catholic.